Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to give you an update on my chickens, what's been going on, but mostly what I have learned in this past year with the chickens, since it was our first year hatching chickens out from eggs from our own chickens, rather than just adding to the flock via getting chicks at the nursery or from friends. If you're new to my channel, we've been raising chickens, at least from a more serious standpoint, for the past 7 years. Now, years and years ago, I think before we even had our kids, we had a couple of bantams. We had one rooster and one hen, and those were more just for fun. I did use their eggs, even though they were small. They were actually the perfect size for making a small batch of cornbread for just 2 people. But the year after I started my channel, because it took us time to really build up a good sturdy coop, and Patrick has a whole series of videos on that. I'll link to that full series down below so you can see how he built it, but he made it very sturdy, so it's safe from raccoons especially. That's what we are most likely to have an issue with here, and anything else that might try to get to at them through the night. But anyway, yeah, you can check out that whole video if you're looking at building your own coop, and you can see what he did, just get some ideas. Quite a few months ago, I had got some chicks from a friend. I'd bartered for them, and she thought they were all females. I got 3. Well, one of them ended up being a rooster after all, and he is a beautiful rooster, and I named him Antonio, and I was actually glad. Even though I've been nervous about getting a rooster in this small neighborhood, a couple of years ago, I did talk to my closest neighbors and asked them what they thought, if they had any problems with it, and they didn't. And there are other people in our neighborhood that, around this area, this side of town, that have roosters. So we're not the only one. I just want to say that because some people know, if they've been following me for any length of time, they know that most of what we do, even though we have 2 other pieces of property, we do most everything right here in this shy 1/3 acre lot in a neighborhood. So I am very courteous of my neighbors. I do consider them, and I did talk to them. And if you had watched some more recent videos, you would have heard a whole lot more commotion going on than what you're hearing now, because at the time, after I hatched out that first batch of chicks, I ended up with only 4 viable eggs. A lot of them didn't get fertilized. Antonio's still young. Only 4 hatched. 3 of those were roosters. 3 of those were cockerels. And so I was disappointed, because really I wanted hens, but I knew there was a chance of that happening. But as soon as they were big enough to take out, this is why it's a lot more quiet now, we took them out. Well, one of them we gifted to a friend. She really wanted the one that came from one of our buff Orpingtons. And then the other 2, they were really going to be beautiful roosters. They weren't entirely full grown, but they were going through so much feed. They were causing so much more commotion, not just with their crowing, but they were starting to go after the young hens, already trying to mate with them. And it was too loud and obnoxious. And then the amount of feed was just astronomical, just having those 2 other cockerels. I couldn't believe how much feed that they ate. So it was time to take them out. And as hard as it was, it's just a fact of life. And we knew nobody else around would want any more roosters, because anyone we know that has chickens and wanted roosters, they have plenty. So yeah, that was just the best thing. So we turned them into dinner. And taking them out that young meant that they were going to be a lot more tender than if we had waited. So that was just one of the things that we had to do. Besides those chicks, I only ended up with the 1 hen. I did get a couple more hens of golden comets from my friend. Yeah, so, we've been adding a little bit more, because all of my buff Orpingtons I originally got 7 years ago. I only have 3 left. 1 died of old age on it naturally. We took another 2 out last year because we knew they were on their way out. And then this year we had to take out 2 more. And so I have 3 remaining. They were still, in fact, one of them is still laying at the time I'm shooting this video, which is actually August 17th. You'll be seeing this probably in September. And the other 2 are done, at least for the season, maybe for good. I don't know yet, but I know one for certain is molting, and I'm sure the other one's going to start molting anytime. So they're just done for the season. And Claire's still kind of putting out an egg. She was doing every day. Now she's dropping down to maybe once every other day. So I'm thinking she's going to start molting soon. So I'm hoping I can get at least one more year out of them. They'll be 8 years old next year. So we'll see next spring. But at any rate, I want to make sure that I have a good replacement rate on all of these older hens I had to take out. We also had to take out our 3 black sex links one at a time through this past season. And it's hard. It's hard to do, but especially when you live in a small area, you cannot keep birds around that are no longer going to be productive. And you got to replace them with productive birds. So that's what we've been doing. And anyway, and then what I did, I chose only eggs from the Buff Orpingtons that were still laying 3 weeks ago, which at that time were only 2. And I picked out 9 eggs. I knew whose eggs were whose. And unfortunately, 5 of those eggs were not fertilized. So I had to get rid of them. So all the eggs that were remaining were from Claire, which I was actually happy about because she's always been my sweetest Buff Orpington. And as of today, this morning, 3 of them have hatched out. I have 1 more left to hatch, and they actually the 3 hatched a day early anyway, so I'm pretty sure that 4th one, at least I'm hoping, is going to hatch out at least pip later today, and then maybe hatch out sometime tonight or tomorrow morning. One of the things I wanted to touch on, which I've mentioned before, is that you'll hear this rumor that goes around, and it typically comes from people maybe they've even been raising chickens far longer than I have, but they started off with lots and lots of chickens because they had the space, where one of the benefits to having backyard chickens is that you can keep better tabs on who is laying what egg. And so there's this wives' tale that says the round eggs will produce hens and the pointy eggs produce roosters. And I remember thinking how silly that sounded, because especially if you're paying close attention to your hens and who lays what egg, you would know that the shape of the egg is determined by the hen, not the sex of the chick inside the egg, and certainly not by the rooster. So Claire always lays round eggs. That's why I knew which eggs were hers. Where Mini Pearl and Kicking Birds were harder to tell apart because they are both Buff Orpingtons, and they both lay the same shape egg and same size. I can only assume because they were not fertilized that maybe all those eggs came from Kicking Bird, since she was the first one to start molting. So maybe she was getting ready to go into her molt and was just, don't touch me, because those new feathers coming in can be very sensitive and painful if they're touched. And so they wouldn't want to mate with a rooster at all. So yes, the whole shape of the egg thing is just a wives' tale. You're going to end up, no matter what shape eggs you're going to get, you're going to get roosters or you're going to get hens, because the sex of the chick is determined by the rooster. The shape of the egg is determined by the hen. I'll show you some images and clips from my first hatching. That also includes the 3 young Buff Orpington chicks I bought from our local nursery to add more hens to our flock. But I simply took 2 Misfits Market boxes and then put them together. I had a piece of Lexan that I thought would be perfect for a window so that they could see out instead of just being able to see out up above. And then the grandkids and myself could easily look in at them, and I could have them up on the ping pong table. So we cut out a hole for that, put that in there, and then Patrick built actually a nice solid base for the boxes. So they might last me a couple of years until he's ready to build something more solid for me. But I really want something I could take apart if I need to. So that worked really good. I decided to go with a heat plate. I'd never heard of a heat plate. I'd always just used the lamps that we typically use, but I'm liking the heat plate. I did a video on that. I find I like it way better than using the heat lamp, but it is really nice, and it is so much easier, less risk of fire. And then the fact that you can adjust the height according to how young the chicks are, and then make it higher, and you can have it sloped so the younger ones can go towards the back where they need more heat, and the older ones can be towards the front where they need less heat. But that worked out really good. And so that's what I started them out in. And then with that first batch, using a dog pen that was open on top, but the sides were too wide, but the slats are too wide, so I had to put bird netting all around and across the top to keep them contained. But then before these recent chicks hatched, Patrick actually built me a nice little hutch for the older chicks for integrating into the coop with the with the adult chickens. And so I'm really excited about this. I'll put a couple clips of it here. The grandbabies found it just a great jungle gym, really. So we left it out on the deck for a week for them to play in, and then we did just move it into the chicken coop. So that way the chicks, you know, they can all see each other, get used to seeing each other until they're big enough to be able to fully integrate with the adult chickens. And my other method worked great. It just was more of a hassle because I had to use clothespins, and every time I wanted to get the chicks out to put them out in the enclosed outside area for them, you know, it was so much more of a hassle. But this will be easier because I got a lid I can just lift and, you know, don't have to hassle with the bird netting. So I'm really happy that I have that. And so, you know, we're just finding ways to make things easier as we go along, now that we're at the point where we're just reproducing our own chickens this way. It doesn't mean I will never add new chicks from either the nursery or from my friend. If she gets some that I'm like, oh yeah, I'd love to trade for that, you know. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that. But I'm finding that it's going to be important for us to do our best to try to rotate through our chickens faster, because, you know, after a couple of years, the meat on the hens as well as the roosters are going to get really, really tough. And we did do that with a couple of the older ones, and it was so hard getting the meat off the bones, even after cooking them for 2 or 3 days. So it's, you know, and I was able to get the meat where it was actually edible by cooking it, then freezing it, then dehydrating it. So now I can just flake it up and add it to soups and more. But it's really a pain. It's so much harder to deal with when they're older like that. So what we're going to be doing, hoping to do mostly, is to rotate through them faster. You know, it doesn't mean I'll never keep a really, really good hen for a longer period of time if she's a good layer and she's a sweet chicken. And then one of the questions I did get, because we did get an incubator, just a cheap little incubator, and decided to do it. I was kind of going back and forth of wanting to just wait and see if one of my hens went broody and let her do the work so I wouldn't have to. But then on the other hand, I really wanted to be able to be a part of the whole process, because that really kind of forces you to learn more about the whole process and pay close attention. On top of that, because I had a mix of old hens and very young hens, I had no guarantee I would have any hens that would actually go broody this year, and none did. So I'm really glad I got the incubator. Thus, this last batch was also incubated because none of my hens went broody. And now we're at the end of the season, and some of them are starting to mold. Since I wanted to start doing that right away, I just didn't want to risk waiting and then never have a hen go broody. Really glad I got the incubator. One thing I'll say about my incubator that I'm, you know, because I didn't know, I just was looking, okay, this sounds like a good one, is that I paid $40 for it. It was pretty cheap. I didn't want a big one because of our small area. My goal isn't to try to hatch out 24 or more chickens at a time. You know, this will take up to 12, so that's why I picked it. And it had decent ratings. But I would say look for a different one. Look for one that you can leave the egg tray in that holds the eggs in place, but you can just turn off the rotator. This one doesn't work that way. To get the eggs, so because in the last 3 days of the incubation, you got to put them in what's called lockdown mode so that they're no longer rotating. Because what's going to happen is that within the last 3 days, that chick's going to turn so it's facing up in the egg so that it can pip and then start unzipping from there. And if that egg keeps turning, that chick could end up facing the wrong way. And so you got to keep them still at the end. Well, the problem with having that, taking the tray out, is you have nothing holding those eggs in place. What I did do this last time is I put a damp wash rag under the eggs, and that does help hold them in place. So as the other chicks are hatching out and wandering around in there, it's not rolling the eggs around. And that did help. I was surprised. So I'll just do that from now on. But I know there's somewhere you can just simply turn the rotating thing off and then keep the tray in there so the eggs will stay in the same place no matter who's wandering around in there. And they're not going to be rolling all over the inside of the incubator. That was the problem I had with this. So I'd say look for that, and also look for one. I actually ended up having to buy a different flashlight, you know, special egg candling flashlight, because the one they sent with that. It was just this little tiny thing, and it was about worthless. Some of your incubators will come with a candler built into it. And so it's nice and bright. It's got the right type of size so that you can properly check the egg and look in there and set it on there. You can actually set it on there. It will sit there securely. That's something I would look for if I was going to buy an incubator again. I think I'm good the way it is now. I probably won't buy another one now that I've kind of figured out some little tricks. And I did, again, like I said, buy a separate flashlight candler. If you have broody hens, though, you can save yourself some work and effort by just letting your hen do the work. But then you miss out on that real hands-on and seeing the whole process. I highly recommend that people do that at least one time, so you can really learn more. And it was great for the grandbabies because they were all here the day that first batch hatched out, and they got to see them hatch out. And it was so cool. Jax was so excited about that. He just was totally enamored with those chicks and seeing them come out of those eggs. So right now I currently have 13 chickens altogether. I have 1 rooster, 12 hens. In the back here, 4 of them are still pretty young. They haven't started laying yet, but one of my Buff Orpingtons that I bought, she's going to start laying anytime, and she's even sweeter than Claire. When I pick her up, she'll just cuddle right into my neck. I love it. I love it. I've never had a chicken quite that sweet, so I'm so thrilled. And then the one that I got from that first hatching that ended up being a female, she ended up being the daughter of Roxy, who's a black chicken with a little poof on top. She does have some olive egger in her, so she actually came out of an olive egg. And so I'm hoping that means she will lay olive colored eggs, but she has this cute little poof, but she's got more of Dad's coloring, Antonio, which he's also a mix. So I don't know what all he has in him, but he's beautiful. Then I've got the 4, well, hopefully I'll have 4 chicks. If that last one does indeed hatch out, I'll have 4 more chicks to add. If they all end up being hens, then I'll have a total of 17 chickens. But if any of them end up being roosters, we'll end up having to do the same thing out of respect for our neighbors, out of respect for all the hens, out of respect for ourselves. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Any thoughts, ideas you would like to share, please put them in comments down below. And any video links I'll be putting will be in the description box. So don't forget to click on more or show more somewhere down here below the video screen. And I will open that right up so you can find all my links and contact information and so on and so forth. And thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.